It's real.
It's Jazz Cabbage Cafe.
Yeah, we are in Lansing. We're at the offices of Redemption and Meds Cafe, formerly Covert Law Firm. This is also where all of the ballots in the 2016 and 2018 petition drives were counted, because the service that was hired to do that used to run out of this. I can't think of what they're called right now.
No,
Political consultants, something or
some
other.
kind of.
And they would count the ballots for, and then validate signatures and all that kind of stuff. And that all happened here, which is all a huge part of that
The work.
process. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
magic work.
That was 235,000 plus signatures in 2018. But don't forget our 2016 campaign, which was unsuccessful, kept off the ballot by the Supreme Court. We collected 325,000, and that was without any national support. That was all grassroots effort too. So all of that's pretty remarkable.
Eric, I like the J being silent, but I think it's oftentimes Jacovetti instead of Iacovetti, as it kind of feels like it should be. But from United Green and many other things, in the industry the last couple of years, and so also attended this networking MiCIA Spring Luncheon. MiCIA, Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, puts on great seasonal events, plus throughout the year at different times, or sponsors things, and really helps companies to network and to stay updated on a lot of really good information. So.
Largest cannabis trade association in the United States of America, we were told today. So it's huge. It's like 400 plus members.
And it's generally on the right side of history for those of us who've been doing a lot of work for a long time. So when you get into the industry side of things, they have perspective that is more along the lines of what we would support typically. So we support them.
And they, of course, are very influential in Lansing, our state capital, when it comes to legislation. There are so few credible voices nowadays speaking on behalf of cannabis. When you have a trade association with as long a history and with as great a reputation as the MiCIA, then in that instance, when they speak, lawmakers listen. And when lawmakers want to learn, the MiCIA is who they go to, which is an even more important factor.
Yeah, there's newly elected lawmakers that haven't quite caught on to that yet, and we know of bills in cannabis that have been introduced that well intended and things like that, but aren't going to match up with what makes sense.
Bit of a misfire.
Yeah. So there's one, we've talked about it before, and I've actually had the conversation with staff and the representative, great people, no problem, as far as, again, intentions and things like that. But it ultimately mandates things that just aren't necessary, puts extra things on labels where many of us believe that there's too many things on the labels right now. So that's kind of going in the opposite direction. And the things they want just aren't like necessary or, relevant. They're like FDA pharmacy-based issues that, and again, well-intentioned, but just not, quite up to date on.
Well, the first one of the list of things that they would like to have added to them requires you to seek the guidance of your prescriber or a pharmacist before using this product. But there are no prescriptions for cannabis.
Yes.
There are no prescribers as defined by law. So it explains why it's such a misfire, why we believe.
Right. And so, for example, the MiCIA says, no, we don't think that's a good idea. That's going to mean a lot to a lot of the decision makers, is kind of what I was ultimately getting to too.
Right.
And Katie.
Hi, are you sure?
From Greenstown.
Hi, guys.
Let's join us.
There's Zach, if you want to grab a seat.
I forgot to do that already, but you're right. Okay, so now we can actually see you before. So there's Eric. I thought I was seeing you on here, but you weren't actually being broadcast. So I'm sorry, but there you are.
Hello.
And now Katie is here.
Yeah.
George is here.
Yep.
Greenstone. And please introduce yourself.
My name is Zach Lynch.
All right. Okay.
George's son. His brother.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
There's some
Okay.
people
Good.
know him as Michael.
So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So Zach.
Yeah.
Katie and George.
Yep.
The whole family is
Everyone's here.
is also, please sit down, George. Also from Greenstone, the southwest area of the state, and kind of near border and of Indiana.
Yeah. So we're in Niles. It's the southwestern corner of Michigan. We are. I like to refer to us as the Catskills of Chicago. We have all the tourism. We've got like the restauranting and the beaches and the waterfronts, at the rivers, the lakes, the ponds, everything like that. Lots of recreational area. But so like the Catskills of Chicago money, right? But and all that tourism that comes with it. But we also have Notre Dame. We're 7 miles north of Notre Dame's campus, and Notre Dame is the most traveled for team in football in all of college sports.
Right.
So it also has some of
The school bus pulls up. You know,
yeah,
on
so
their
but
way
it
to and
also
from
has
games,
some of
yeah.
its like wealthiest alumni, right? So
the
all
airport,
of
the airport,
airports just
there's
are
60
flooded
to
with
100
private
jets there,
planes
depending on
and-
the game.
Nice.
Right. So we get a lot of the tailgaters in particular
Oh, cool.
that come in. So, but we're right.
Did the police stand and sit on the other side of the border and pick people off?
So
No.
no, but particularly in
No.
our area. So I have heard reports.
A bud tender
Of
recently.
friends, yeah, that was, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm about to
Yeah.
say is that what we're seeing and what I'm hearing from is that our friends down in South Bend don't mind because it is decriminalized in South Bend. It's one of the last
Yeah.
things that Mayor
Mayor
Pete,
Pete,
who ran for president,
Buttigieg.
Yes.
that Buttigieg did before he left was
Yeah.
decriminalized
No.
cannabis, just like Ann Arbor was.
Yeah.
What's
right?
his federal position? Transportation?
He is, federal
Yeah.
transportation
Yeah,
secretary now.
secretary.
Yep. So, but yes, that was one of the last things he did before he stepped out in order to run for president was decriminalize cannabis. It was very kind of like quiet. I don't know why it wasn't bigger news. So
I can see him making the case for
Right.
himself
Going
and
on a national
convincingly.
stage,
Sure,
they
yeah.
would suppress that so it
Right.
doesn't upset people in
Right.
fringe states. Yeah.
right, and like, but everybody South Bend is very Mayor Pete proud. Like they still have the big mural downtown on the Oyster Bar, and like they are a proud city, and we celebrate their pride. And so, but again, decriminalized in South Bend.
Good.
We're
That's a good
just
connection. I didn't know
north of
that. That's a nice
Yep.
thing to
Yeah,
know.
We're
there's-
just
there's
but
two
they're
Indianas.
focused. Yeah, they're focused on
They
something
really are.
different. Yeah.
But there's a little bit to Indiana's. You've got Southern Indiana, Indianapolis, and
Uh-huh.
then you've got that Chicago influence and that Northern Indiana. It's closer to Michigan. They're a little bit more liberal. Not a little bit.
Got
There's
little
still,
pockets. Okay.
there's but especially South Bend. That's the most
Nice.
liberal place in the. Again, they have a mayor.
The
That's,
big metro centers,
Yeah.
which usually
Exactly.
are the
Yeah.
Pence was
exactly.
the governor
Exactly.
before.
Oh
you
my
know,
God.
so
Let's
that
not
gives
get
you some
into
kind of
that.
pace
Yeah,
that they were
yeah,
on.
yeah.
So I didn't mention that Adam, Mr. Hashbash, has joined us in the meantime.
Hey,
Adam,
hi,
how you doing?
Adam.
I would like to formally invite former Vice President Pence to Greenstone.
Oh my God!
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
literally.
Simple
like,
drive for
yeah,
him.
come on up and see what
He
we
might
got
be
going on.
campaigning possibly.
Yeah.
Coming
Yeah,
through there.
come
anyway.
up, see what we got going on. We'll give you a pride shirt from a couple of years ago.
Oh,
Like we
that's-
will.
yeah.
We'll deck-
So I want to bring up I know you guys have to go soon to make the trek
yeah,
back.
we're okay. Yeah.
And I want to bring up the networking event today. But I know George, you have if you want to give an overview of your story, you retired and everything, and you came back into the industry. That's kind of an interesting.
well, yeah, it's a long one, but the short version is, I did. That 40 years in the business world, 36 in corporate, the automotive industry, and I was fortunate enough to survive that. And come out with my still my brain intact, and I was presented with an opportunity to get into the cannabis industry. And with my history, I go back to 1969. I can still remember the day, at least the time. It was Thanksgiving vacation. I was 12 years and 11 plus months old, and my older cousin pulled out 3 joints, and we smoked weed for the first time in '69. So I've been there and it was the old school guy for a long, long time. But I got back into the industry here probably when I joined Pandora. It was really interesting. I left Sirius XM satellite radio, and after 11 years, and I went over to Pandora. And everybody smoked, including the CEO. It was kind of weird. So for at that time being in corporate, so I said, hey, if they're going to do it, I'm going to do it. If the bosses are okay with it. So I started smoking weed again. And my son has been an advocate since I caught him smoking back when he was 16. I told him I'd rather have him smoke than drink. So
It's okay. I'm an advocate. It's all right.
Yes.
Unfortunately,
we took the opportunity, and when it came in, and we grabbed it, we tried to make a family business out of it. So I came out of retirement after 11 months in retirement. I came out of retirement and decided to get back in the cannabis industry, and it's been just nothing but an interesting journey.
Well, I was going to say, you did all
We-
those.
there's a lot, there's lots of ups and downs, obviously, but most of it good. And we really enjoy the city of Niles. They've been a good partner to most of the extent. Of course, we all have our issues with the local governments, but bottom line is, overall we've had a good relationship with the city, and things have been progressing smoothly, and we enjoy the time we have in the cannabis industry. That's for sure. Right now, what our big thing is that we're expanding our grow and processing operation, which is also in Niles, and we've come out with a new brand called Sticky Mitten, and my son-in-law is in charge of our production operation, and Adam is doing a great job. He's producing this great CO2 oil that we feel is a safer, cleaner offer to the cannabis vaping world than some of the other products that are out there. So we're seeing that being picked up by people looking at it and having a new experience with CO2, and we're also having a new solventless line under Sticky Mitten. So that adds to our retail operation. But we are a border operation, as my daughter Katie said, that we're so close to the border. We're looking at probably 70% of our operation is thankful to our friends in Indiana. And
I've been to some events there and noticed the high percentage of Indiana participants.
Yeah.
How about Illinois though? Do you get Illinois very often?
we do.
Yeah,
we
we
do.
get a lot
Because
of
the
them.
cannabis is
A lot of
better.
Yeah,
by far
and that's
more
the
than
thing.
that.
That's what it's not only more affordable because of their taxes,
Yeah.
right? And they have significantly less grows, and of course the market is a little bit tighter there, so their prices are still higher. But they're taxed on. So if it's 29% THC, you're paying 29% tax. So
That is
that's
really
how
stupid.
that's how they tax their
Plus-
cannabis plus the
plus-
excise plus
That
It
their
can be up to
That's
30. My understanding is up to 38% tax.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really
So,
stupid.
and then the quality that they comment on constantly is that the Michigan quality is so much better.
Right.
It's not just the pricing, it's the quality. Because even before our pricing started to spiral in the industry, we were still seeing them coming over, and it was still like the quality is better, the price is still better because of the taxes, I'm
Right.
still saving money.
I think that goes back to the caregiver market, because
Yeah.
if we didn't have legacy growers in Michigan that have been growing for the last 15, 20 years, some people that they've actually been in the industry here in the black in the gray black market, and bottom line,
Hey, Adam likes to call it the black
Black
market. He takes
market.
pride in it. So.
well,
Don't
bottom line is,
confuse
if
people.
it wasn't for folks that were in that market and growing, we wouldn't have the quality weed that we do have in Michigan.
Because of knowledge and genetics and all that
Yes.
stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. They did. That's one of the things that the caregiver market brought to the legal market. It's an opportunity that other states don't have. They're starting from literally scratch.
Sometimes.
So because I was in Massachusetts taking care of my father before he passed away, and when Massachusetts legalized, and that's exactly what happened. The weed sucked. I talked to a couple of bud tenders and took them out smoking joint and stuff I get from Michigan. They said, "Where'd you get this?" I said, "Back in Michigan." So,
Yeah.
One of the things you should know is that back when High Times was selling seeds and they were being sold from companies in Europe, those seeds were actually being shipped out of Michigan back in the late 60s, early 70s. So
I didn't know
high
that.
quality weed has been grown in Michigan for many, many years.
Mhm. Wow.
Long before the caregiver concept. And the guy sitting next to Jamie, I didn't catch your name.
George.
George.
You might have frozen.
Nope.
Maybe you were spared. I'm not sure. But he'll get back out.
We're back. I'm back.
There you go.
I
You
didn't-
were addressing George.
George. Okay. Hey, George, here's what I got to tell you. It doesn't matter how much weed you smoke while you work this gig. It's going to do damage. This gig is going to damage your brain because you spent all those years in real industry, doing real business the real way. And now you've entered into like the fifth dimension. Well, not the fifth dimension was pretty good. This is like the sixth dimension where nothing makes sense.
One of the worst dimensions.
People who have no idea what they're doing are investing in millions and millions and millions of other people's money. And 20 years from now, you'll remember I said that.
You've kind of seen some of that, I think.
Yeah.
And I know you've seen it. I know if you came from real business, big business, that you've seen it, because you couldn't do what we do at Sirius Radio.
I don't know. I disagree. The only reason I say that is because in automotive, in construction, in cannabis, there's one thing that's common, and that is our customers. If they were angels, we'd be broke.
Yeah.
All right, and that's just that. It's really crazy. I appreciate you bringing that perspective, but the way that I do business in cannabis the last 2, 3, 5 years here has been so similar to the way that construction companies do business. It's been so similar to the way that automotive companies do business.
Right.
It really
Correct.
is.
It's the scale up that's the problem.
What's that?
It's the scale up that is the problem.
Agreed.
It happened too
Yeah.
fast.
Okay? So you will never be Anderson Consulting. You will never be Jonah Construction, no matter how hard you try, because you can't scale this up. And when I heard that this was a family-run business, there's nobody more anti-industry than me. I like the fact that this is a family-run business. I grew up in a family-run business. I know what it's like to tell your boss to go fuck himself, walk out the door, and your wife get a phone call to see if you're going to be at work tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Yes.
No.
Yeah.
I appreciate the family business aspect. What I don't appreciate is that I can't see you having 20 or 50 stores across the state of
We
Michigan.
only have one. We only have one.
We only have one.
But you couldn't scale up. It's not doable. Because as soon as you get a little bit bigger, it gets away from you.
So sure. And we're not planning on that. Our focus right now is, we've got a dispensary in a good location. As long as Indiana stays illegal or medical, we're fine. And
Right.
I think if you follow the headlines, Indiana will be the last state in the union before they turn AU. So
I would have thought it was Texas a while ago.
oh
No.
no.
Now maybe.
Now, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, a few years
They're
ago.
looking at the money in Texas.
No, I think you're talking Iowa and probably Indiana. Those are
But-
the two states.
Wisconsin.
And they will probably tax
Wisconsin.
it heavily because they'll have to do it through the legislature.
Yeah.
And the legislature always wants to
They'll
tax
fuck it
our
up, and then it
industry.
won't,
And-
it
right.
won't do anything to
So-
really
But-
invite people into the stores.
But as you mentioned earlier, you folks benefit from the Western state tourism, meaning the Western side of Michigan has great tourism. And
Oh,
it
absolutely.
all comes from Indiana and Illinois.
Yeah, and
Right.
Katie was talking about the really cool, environment around there that people can
Right.
participate in.
And with things being legal in Illinois, people are interested now. So they travel, they
They get
purchase,
weight and then
they take
drive
home.
home.
So,
Oh, absolutely.
we did an industry networking thing, the MiCIA spring luncheon today, and we were all there. And I did want to get back and get your thoughts on what you guys got out of that meeting today. What was of interest?
Well,
First of all, it was a great networking event. It was a lot of people.
oh,
showed up, a
absolutely,
lot of great companies
absolutely. I
were
mean,
there.
that's we come from 2.5 hours away in the driving snow the entire way.
Yeah,
But it's always worth
sunny
it.
out now.
No, hey, it's beautiful. It's beautiful out here now. Yeah,
We
absolutely.
light that halfie. It's about to be 4:20. Yes, but the
Thank
drive
you.
was
Priorities.
Sorry.
No, but
Also,
I-
I do have a message from Robin. Robin says, Adam, she says hi.
That's important. That means she read my
No, but I think this
I
this
did.
event was really it gets better and better. I mean, the speakers today, obviously, Brian Hanna. When you have this director come in and talk as frankly as he does and straight up. And I've met
He's
with
winning
him.
some people over. He did a
Right.
lot of skepticism.
Absolutely,
Well, he's a
absolutely.
cop.
You know, hey,
Everybody was nervous.
I'm very comfortable with cops. My father was a state police officer in Massachusetts for 27 years.
Yeah,
So
but he was a fishing, like, he
No,
was a
but he-
cool cop.
he was a cool cop, but he was still a cop. He still had a gun. He still carried a
I
gun.
get it. I get it.
Yada 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 yada. But bottom line is, Brian Hanna is, as far as I was concerned, and as far as I'm concerned, a straight up dude, and really does a great job for us right now. As far as I'm, at this point, and we're lucky. We got lucky, and so talking to him, it was great, and it's always nice to hear some perspective from the Jeff Irwin and definitely from our great
Kevin. Yeah.
Kevin.
Oh,
Kevin.
man.
Oh,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
I mean, but he's about to be. That's one of the things that he announced. Did you guys talk about that yet?
Not
He
yet.
announced. Can I? Is
Go
it-
ahead.
okay.
Sure.
Well, he announced today that he's stepping back. He's running for mayor of
Yeah.
Westland,
Yes.
and like that's
No,
big.
that's a real. No, that's not. I'm talking about the other Kevin. I like the
Oh,
Kevin
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 McKinney,
McKinney.
our lobbyist.
Our lobbyist,
Oh yeah,
long-term
I'm a big
lobbyist.
fan.
I mean,
big fan.
I understand. Everything that he says you can trust because he's been there, done that, and he's literally in part of the fabric.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I knew, and that's why I was successful in the automotive industry. I became part of the fabric.
Yeah.
I was inside, and he's inside, and so bottom line is that's the kind of guy you want to talk to, and he does it straight up. I personally, I don't think we're going to get very much out of this legislature. Just like if you read between the lines, he said the same thing.
It was very.
He lowered
We're not-
expectations.
You gotta. I never thought we were going. So he told it like it is. I don't think we're going to be, doing very much cheering about too much. We're going to be happy with whatever we get, because it's going to be a difficult pull.
Well, Kevin is an important person. All the way back in 2010, we formed the Michigan Association of Compassion Centers, the MAC, the state's very first trade association, in response to raids that were conducted by Oakland County and other facilities. Jamie was on the board, and then Big Daddy's here was on the board also. It was me.
Robin was heavily involved and
Yeah.
did a lot of great work.
We
Yeah, she
hired
talks about that.
Robin and Kevin right then. I think they came on board, if not in late 10, then early 11. And there's nobody else in Michigan that has that kind of a
They are the
history
only
in
ones
this
together
industry.
that have gone through the whole cycle of all
It's
the
Right.
legislation
They
and
have the history.
everything.
The two of them are
Yeah.
A lot of us couldn't
Two
handle
of
the
them are
legislature anymore and had to dump out.
Yeah.
And that's Robin's the same way. Robin's part of the fabric. That's
Big
why.
advantage,
That's
yeah.
why it works. That's why MiCIA. That's why we're the biggest organization in the country.
But it's-
Is because Robin
And it's
is
very
part of the
reflective.
fabric.
Yeah,
She's part of
she's
the
a part
fabric.
of it, and it's reflective of other industries born in
Well-
Michigan. It's reflective of the way that clientele purchases, and like it's so reflective in the way that Midwesterners work different, specifically from Michigan. Like
Yes.
that is something that is actually trackable.
The work ethic.
Correct.
But the work ethic that comes from Michigan because of like genetic trauma, is
Yeah.
one way to say it, but it's because of the way that we're bred here on the line, working blue collar, working these jobs.
George counts like a farmer.
But like it works into the way that even retail mindset works, right? Like so when we have our purchasing, when people visit and they come into Michigan for tourism, the reason why Saugatuck and Douglas and things like Holland or Niles, like these little towns up here work so well like they do up in Traverse City, is because everything is mom and pop owned, and it's
Quaint
what
little
you
nice towns,
expect.
yeah.
It's
Quaint
it's
places
quaint
instead of
places. It's
commercial.
exactly what you expect
Yeah.
from Michigan when you're going there for that experience.
You're up in a
Everything to
small
be
town
made here,
USA.
everything is small town USA. And what's even better is specifically Southwest Michigan, but the western side of Michigan, if you look at the architectural, the way that the towns are built around, it's very influenced by like Boston and Rhode Island, Connecticut, and things like that, because of the way the waterways come in. Same thing in Holland, Saugatuck, Douglas, New Haven, things like that. and like the way that it comes in, they're very East Coast influenced. And just like Chicago would be our Midwestern New York, hence Catskills of Chicago, we have all the money and everything that comes up from there. So then it's doubled down on the influence on what you see as like a sister pairing to, again, influences in the way that people travel.
You know, what we're really talking about is creating experiences that
Yeah.
encourage people to do Canna tourism.
Yes.
Now we've
Yes.
seen
Oh my
on some
gosh.
border places that have talked about doing wedding chapels that would be 420 themed,
Mhm.
and the question about what licensure they would need. But that's just a solid concept, as well as social consumption lounges. We want an opportunity for people to utilize prior to having to go across the border, so they don't smoke while they drive. You know,
Right.
there's so many different issues, especially in Indiana with any kind of consumption. So there are just so many opportunities when you look at encouraging Canada tourism, because you've already got the traffic there. You don't have to encourage people from Indiana to come up. They're already
they're
doing
there.
it.
Because
So you're
that
giving
is-
them extra choices once they arrive.
But what we're not putting together is that with that tourism comes everyone's cabins. Yes, we might be one of the most southern places in Michigan, right? But we have everyone's cabins from Indianapolis and from Chicago and all.
That's their up north.
We're
So
there
this is
up
like,
north.
I believe
Yeah.
within 500 miles of half of the population or something like
Is
that.
that
And it's a-
crazy?
Yeah, it's a desirable.
Yes,
Supposed to be-
it's
yeah,
huge.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
absolutely huge. The tourism for us, so what we refer to, and I'm sure that places like Ann Arbor and like Kalamazoo with West, when school is in session,
Mhm.
they see the lift. Our high season is 420 is our kickoff. That's what we prepare for, right? That's the kickoff of our high season. And then it just builds all summer long, Memorial Day. And then 4th of July is the peak. And then you see Labor Day come down a little bit, and then it dies in September. But what we have specifically in our spot is tourism from then football season.
Boom.
So we see Notre Dame influence from September until October, and then
I'm glad it has some value.
Yep, and I
How
mean,
many
it
miles
plummets.
between South Bend and Aurora?
Okay, so we're 4.9 miles from the
You
border.
know, I don't dislike
No.
many teams.
We're 3.3 miles.
3.3 miles from the border and
Right.
4.9 from Notre Dame and
No,
seven.
no,
Well, I'm happy for this.
4.9
Looks good on
from
you.
the 90-80,
Yeah,
and then 7 miles from the entrance of Notre Dame.
there we go.
So
That's awesome.
literally you're 7 miles from Notre Dame. So when
Yeah.
you talk about being able to capitalize on the football season, that's a reality.
Oh, it is.
People don't have to travel a great distance, and there's no border checkpoints, there's no turnpike fees or anything that would inhibit people from coming across the line.
There's
There's just a nice little sign that says "Welcome to Michigan."
And I'm glad
Yeah.
that the cops are hanging out on the other side of
Yeah.
the
They
border.
don't.
picking people
I
off.
Well,
would throw caution
I'm
to
not
the
saying it doesn't
wind.
happen.
Well,
You shouldn't be
No,
careful,
it
but otherwise,
definitely. I would throw caution to
Yeah.
the wind.
Yeah.
That absolutely comes with the caveat, and especially on the suburbs of South Bend,
Yeah.
I would throw extreme caution for the border
I-
because those smaller towns
They-
and police forces do care. It is absolutely
Revenue.
and that's where, like, for example, we employ people from Indiana, but we are very, very careful with them, and we
yeah, don't
teach.
put your shit in your car.
Yeah, we
right?
teach, we
Yeah.
educate, we provide, like, we do a lot of team engagement and cultural building
Mhm.
within our company. So for example, this last Sunday, we held a Canna Prom. We've done this for a couple of years now. We don't want to try to overwhelm our staff during the holidays. Retail, it's already pretty busy. It's our peak in the winter. And everyone else has their own stuff happening during that time. So in order to be able to be impactful and have an employee event that was kind of fun, a little bit fancy, we had decided to treat 420 week like a homecoming week, if you will, and do a whole thing of sales now the whole week long, and then we wrap it up with Canna Prom for our staff, and it's a big formal event, and it's just a party, and like it's very, very.
I saw some
everyone
pictures
gets-
on Facebook.
Yes, oh
It
my
looked
gosh.
really good.
Yeah,
It looked
everybody
really
gets
good.
so
Let
into
me
it.
tag on to that one. Thinking about it, on top of doing really cool things, like fun things, and
Yeah,
for the company and for
Yeah.
really everybody who's participating, and I'm sure there's promotions involved and all types of great deals for the consumer.
yeah, there
So,
is.
You guys also help out a lot with advocacy type stuff, and Glenn in particular. I know
Yep.
you've been behind raising a lot of money. We all love Glenn.
We do a ton of
Josie's
that.
on quite a bit. We
Yep.
help them out, so just to recognize that you're right in, and
Thank
have
you.
done some significant stuff. I know that the stuff with
Ferry
Baylor-
Street,
Baylor
the
Craft,
Valor
like,
Days for
yeah.
Glenn. That has been a
Yeah.
huge success.
And Glenn, he's referring to Great Lake Expungement
Right.
Network.
Yeah.
Chelsea and
GLEN.
company, and actually, me and Josh and I are involved in the ground floor of that thing.
Yeah.
You know, happy about that. Still do a lot of work with them and support. Josie's the
Great
engine, the
people
face,
to
all that
work
stuff, obviously. But like,
Yep.
but she draws people in to support,
She
and
does.
donate, and it works.
She knows how to work our parking lot. One of the things that she always loved sharing with everyone, she was
That
just
used
like,
to be an
I
insult
used
for a
to
woman,
sell
right?
weed in this parking lot.
Yeah,
So,
not
like,
that kind of work.
her the way she can call out and holler at anybody and make friends immediately. I mean, she's just, gosh, she holds the best.
She
memories.
works it.
And then of
Does
course,
she work it? Holy
Sons
crap.
and Daughters and
never
Redemption
do that.
Foundation.
Yeah, we've done
That was
both.
a
We've done a
mistake.
ton of
Should
stuff
never
with both of
snap.
those.
And you
And
work
then
with Redemption Brand and the foundation.
Brand and
So
the
there's a lot of
foundation.
synergy in our like-minded kind of places,
Yeah.
and that's why we're all kind of here having this conversation right
But
now.
it is, it's part of the culture. It's
Yeah.
part of like, we respect so much so the roots of the industry and the roots of how it's grown. And we've supported undoubtedly all aspects, and it bleeds into our ethics and our morals and the way that we purchase, whether it be reciprocal or relationship or deal or anything like that. We are also, again, a Josie point that she pointed out to me, and I didn't think it was a thing at first, but she was like, you guys own a cannabis company and you actually consume cannabis, and that's a pretty big fucking deal.
That's
And
a
I
big point.
didn't realize
Not as
that.
common as it should be.
Yeah, I did not realize that.
Pure investment for a lot of people.
It is just a matter of bean counters trying to make money off a $2.3 billion industry.
No,
And some people don't use
that wasn't my point again. My
Our
point
people
is,
also.
hey, trust
Yeah.
me, my point is to get in here. Well, okay, going back to the 70s, I literally, and I'm admitting this in public now, online.
Nobody's watching it.
I'm past the statute of limitations. Thank God. This is literally, it's going on. It's 50 years ago that I sold my first weed in 1973. And so I put myself through college selling weed,
in Boston.
outside of Boston at Western New England College in Springfield, Massachusetts. And anybody that's watching this, when they graduate, they went to school between 74 and 79. They probably smoked my weed. Bottom line is,
That's great, George.
bottom line is, I got in this business for two reasons: to have my family, the long story about that, bringing my daughter and son-in-law back from my granddaughter back from Wyoming, getting my son out of the automotive industry, who didn't. He was like me. It was already sucking him dry after only about 3 or 4 years. And the other reason is to smoke good freaking weed. I mean, I said I can have the access to the best weed to smoke.
Roll some bags and I get for free.
And that was the entire experience between my life from 1969 and 1989 was to try to smoke the best weed, and that was the whole goal.
What happened in '89? Damn! Why would you stop that?
He was born. My wife said, "Wait, we got 2 kids. You got a job. If you lose it, we're in trouble." And of course, you got to remember that was still
There was different perspective.
George coming out of Reagan into George Bush. Holy shit! They still, this is our brain on drugs. I couldn't lose my job, so.
That's
I
still somebody's story today, unfortunately.
And fortunately, the state got rid of the board, or you would not be where you're at today.
We got licensed, and that's something that we were one of the first licensed, but we were pre-qualified.
Pre-qualified.
Yeah,
I'm in the top 50 or 60 of people that got
right, but
pre-qualified.
But then the process became weird.
We went through it. You and Mom did everything, and it was very intrusive. But we got through with flying cars.
Yeah, we got a unanimous thing from the board, but
But that's because you couldn't tell your truthful story you just told.
What?
Well,
He is hearing aids.
I gotta wear hearing
You
aids.
couldn't tell the truthful story. If the board knew that you did that stuff, they
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
College.
they did that.
Yeah.
You know, again, I think that was the statute of limitations was gone on that.
Yeah.
So you know,
Not
Well,
for the
also,
board,
when
was it?
Robin alluded to the parking ticket thing, I believe that had to do with Kelvin
Not-
Jones.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
it
that's
was.
why the board was
Yeah.
disbanded, from what I understand.
And they also went
Timeline
after,
works
like,
out there.
They went after people's juvenile records and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Daily,
it's
because-
inappropriate. It was wild. It
So
was
you know what? I
unbelievably
want to
unfair.
when I'm thinking about it. I'm sorry, I don't get,
about this.
but like Rick showed up at every single one of those. I used to like go to a couple and watch
Yeah.
stuff like that. And there's more than once when he got up when there's public speaking and challenged their integrity.
Yeah.
I want to talk about integrity here for a second.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
jeez.
that's on record early.
It was a big topic today too.
Yeah.
I think that was probably the most informative thing from the MiCIA was just Kevin and the information from the
And
past.
how
Yeah.
blunt he is. How
Yes.
frankly he
Yeah.
speaks.
But that's
It's-
terrifying, isn't it?
Right, but we
It
need
is.
we do it's
Everybody's dirty.
he delivers the information very well.
Well, the fact is, there's a spike in distillate price here in Michigan. Distillate oil is a commonly used forerunner for a lot of products that we sell in the industry. And the price of distillate was extremely low, unreasonably so, even considering the dip in prices that we've seen from flour. And after enforcement actions happened, and Brian Hanna was very public about his pledge to continue to go after people who are combining illegal market product in the regulated market here in Michigan, all of a sudden the price of distillate is up. And it's obviously not because there's a shortage or product or anything like that. It's because people that were cheating now are less likely to do so. So
That's
that's
the magnifying glass and the stickers on those liters.
so the reality is that what we see is enforcement action is actually having a positive effect on pricing, even if there's still interactions between the illegal and the regulated marketplace.
there was somebody
that
alluding to,
CRA doesn't
like-
think is right.
Like saying, hey, let's kind of take a look at that. You can probably see that there's too much concentrate versus the amount of biomass
Yes.
that he was alluding to. Anyway.
Do a little
Right,
forensic
yeah,
accounting.
it's-
Yeah,
yeah, they're doing
that's
a
data-driven.
forensic. Yeah, it's data-driven forensic
Yeah.
accounting.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, they'll find the semis with all the distillate. Like, they're gonna come across them, and that's what he kept saying, whether it be through innuendos or not. That's literally, he was like, I'm gonna find it, whether I find it on the cameras or whether I find it in the numbers. I'm
Mhm.
gonna find it.
Yeah.
And there were 3 investigations brought up today.
Yeah.
The former Speaker Chadworth, of course, the Rick Johnson thing that we're talking
Yeah.
about, right, also a former speaker.
Right.
And
Chatfield.
then the
Chadfield.
and then there was the donations to the connected
Packs.
or
501c4s.
or the C4s, which are
Yeah.
nonprofit political organizations.
Anonymous
They're really called
donors.
C4s.
People donate
Yeah,
anonymously.
C4s.
They're called
C3 is charitable, where you can get a tax deduction for that. It's just education and stuff. A C4 can take a political position, I think, at times at least, or there's some differences between that, and it's not charity, it's not a tax deductible donation, but they still gather a bunch of money and spread it out with being able to be anonymous.
Something with the name C4 blew up in someone's face.
Yeah, what a
So-
surprise.
So-
The reality is, listening to Kevin McKinney talk about today, he specifically focused on the corruption investigation here in Michigan, which has named 3 former speakers of the House and 2 former Senate Majority Leaders as being involved in that investigation. And 1 former speaker was formally charged today, formally convicted. And the fact is, Kevin said there is more to come. Now, we've talked about this a lot, and many of us have speculated. It seems like there's a much larger nexus of evil that was going on at that particular time, and the FBI is likely to root it out. But to hear Kevin say that, to me, carried a lot more weight than my beliefs and my hopes. That's a guy who's been on the inside, as we mentioned, since the start.
Yeah. And
There's
So
very well
he has
maybe
so
something
many
he couldn't say.
contacts.
I mean,
Yeah.
For him, he
that's very
didn't.
possible,
He was very, very
He knows the
generalized.
lines.
But boy, just to hear him confirm what we've hoped all the way along, that we believe there's more criminality to be punished in this particular scheme. Because, man, they really did screw people over.
Am I remembering correctly that Hannah had said that they were going to be using the investigation or something like that in order to find out what licenses, and they were going to be punished.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like
That's
I'm frustrated. I'm waiting for that.
You know, there's the other side too. There's many people or many companies that were denied through this process unfairly too.
Yeah.
That gets
Yeah, what happens to them?
You know, I wonder if this net, like, there are at least loose connections between those three investigations that we know of. I'm wondering if this net will demonstrate, you know, more direct kind of like
I think
at least maybe trendy type stuff. I'm not sure.
one of the worst things I heard is, and Kevin say, is that we have got a cloud over the industry now
Yeah.
in the state government
Yeah.
because of this. Because it's not because of anything we did. It's not because of anything that anyone in the industry did, whether it be black market, gray market, or the legal market. None of us did anything. It was the politicians that created this cloud over the industry now that, hey, we're all dirty or somebody.
Well, and
You mean
or a number of
SNL?
people that are-
49 and 50th, that's corruption. That's not new, by the way.
No.
We like that. We've been shitty for a long time. Go ahead, Adam. Sorry.
There were some industry people who bought their licenses, so not everybody.
This is what this is going to show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least they
So-
paid to facilitate their licenses, you know.
It's a falling
Right.
out.
So to say that that this didn't come from the industry, I highly doubt that Johnson said, "Go get me money and I'll make my decision." I believe what happened is the same thing that always happens, and that's the lobbyist shows up and says, "I can take care of you."
I think he
But
said, "Go
Johnson
talk to my wife."
Johnson
Yeah.
was the lobbyist though with Johnson Dodak. He was a lobbyist for years before
He knew how
giving
it
that
worked.
up to become chairman. So I
Yeah,
mean,
but
you're absolutely right. They did negotiate with the lobbyist.
You remember, Adam, we talked last night about how fucked up it was that you stepped right out of being Speaker of the House and right into a lobbying firm.
Yes.
And Senator Irwin did bring up today possible legislation that would address that. So
Yeah.
I did like hearing
I'm-
that.
I'm waiting to hear about the FBI investigation into Johnson pre-marijuana in Michigan. Because that guy's been on the take for years, and I'm almost willing to bet money on it.
But there is a statute of limitations beyond which they can't reach back to. So
To charge him criminally,
Mhm.
but they can certainly expose it.
I'm more worried about the conscience of the med community here.
How far are they going to go? We kind of think that like some of the really big players in this probably have insulated themselves to some degree. And
Absolutely.
And the fallout will be like a lot of the guys that were actually doing the deals and transferring the funds.
None of this happened without money. Money is the grease that made the wheel turn. And we've only seen one guy, Delale, who gets busted, and he wasn't really a gigantic money man. According to his plea, he only contributed about $68,000. That's peanuts in the world of influence peddling that takes place in Lansing. So there's a lot more money people behind this whole scheme in order for it to even be functional.
Remember
And
the
you
wording
know
of
it's coming.
So the wording of the charges is at least $100,000. It's not like just $100,000.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, his wife got another $40,000 or $50,000 for being a consultant, according to
$4,000 a month or something.
$4,000
like
a
that.
month,
So
yeah.
I'm sure there's
Yeah, the
probably a couple
dinners
of
and the
those, you know.
trips and everything
2
like
trips to
that.
Canada.
Yeah, the private jet.
Public corruption, man.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
We've got a timeline.
Yeah.
We got to hit the road in order to get back tonight.
Yeah, we
Else
gotta-
got a
we
long
gotta-
drive.
You talked longer than I thought. So
I
I
I'd like to
appreciate
have
you
everything
guys
else.
for having us on. Thank
Yeah.
you so
Thank you.
much.
Glad to
Always
see
a
See you at
pleasure to meet you
Interchange.
guys.
Probably not me, no.
You'll see me.
Mhm.
And also, thank you for your
And we have
It's all of us.
we did it last time, so I think it would be good to do it again. It was pretty successful. So I haven't confirmed it or whatever. I don't even know what date it is, but yes, I think that as long as
May
it's,
17th
Matt's
and
got
18th.
yeah, is it similar?
Last same thing, yeah.
Okay.
It's at the Eagle Eye in Lansing, and then it's May 17th and 18th. Interchange.
It's another MiCIA,
yeah,
like
MiCIA sponsored
participant.
it.
Okay,
Yeah. There is a lot of people from the MiCIA. They definitely get a discount, but those that are non-members
It's a
are
good opportunity to
it's a
get tapped into
great-
some
yeah, but
wider.
But it's MiCIA sponsored, but it's the Marijuana Venture magazine. It's their event.
Right, I remember
MiCIA
reading that
sponsors
last time.
it.
Yeah.
And then, but so lots of people in and out of of the association, which is really great. I think it's great for the association to be able to pitch and come to them. That's of course like an incredible benefit, but also for us to be able to interact with those that we don't see quarterly at like the spring or fall caucus or the winter gala or the summer annual. But the summer annual was announced today. That of course that went live. Tickets are live for the summer
I
annual.
really believe we're going to do that, but we got to jump on it because, as Robin said, that one always sells out.
It sells out
more and more popular.
very, very fast.
Yes, so
Yeah.
And it's a great event.
Yeah,
Excellent.
we were grateful and lucky enough to be able to snag a condo, like an Airbnb, a couple of weeks ago, so that we knew we had it done and taken care of.
Sweet.
I risked making sure that the dates were right, and that was good. So, like, I guess.
And by the way, we changed the
Yeah.
date, so that's just by a couple days.
I
Don't
would
worry
be
about
like,
it.
what? No, but yeah, no, I risked looking at a pattern, and and it worked out really well. So we got some great accommodations. Now we just gotta get the tickets before they sell out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah,
Appreciate
man.
it.
We
Thank you for-
appreciate you.
I love the
It's good
conversation.
meeting you.
Nice to meet you.
All right, we'll see you guys soon.
We don't really have commercial breaks, so
Okay.
See you later.
They're in the form of
thank you very much.
transitions, right?
All right. Thanks, guys.
You want me to shut you in?
Sure.
For noise?
And- And just to fill some time, I'll be honest, guys like George and guys like Rick, who spent years in actual industry where, you know, there are things done a certain way, to now get into this emerging industry and try to apply some of the skills that they have, only to find out that you can't, because this industry doesn't work that way.
Some
think
things,
that's
but you got to be
great.
selective.
Right. I love when I hear that some guy did 40 years time, 9 to 5, and now he's working, 7 to 7, and he's loving it and enjoying it, but nothing he knew from before got to be done a little differently. And I think that's what makes the small mom and pop a lot different than the industry, what we call the industry, the big guys who just come in with a binder of SOPs and say, here, this is how you're going to do that. So I'm excited.
You can't import all skills from one industry to the other, but what you can import are people skills. And the way that you conduct yourself in a professional environment and in a professional manner, it makes a difference. And it makes a difference in your own confidence in your employees, your retention rate, how quickly you have to turn over, or how quickly you expand, or the type of business connections you make. So when you have years in another industry, especially a service industry or a sales type environment, you learn how to talk to people and how to deal with things. And I think that is a life skill. It may be a job specific skill, but it's a life skill. So no matter where you go on your journey, you're going to have that as skill and ability. And in this industry, because some of those characteristics are lacking in some people, I think when you have even standard professionalism, it really stands out.
Adam, the biggest one I see is the lack of that's on me mentality. Like, I've got open deals with clients right now that I'm waiting on the processor to finish their promise, right? They made a promise.
Oh, yeah.
And you have someone that will just run with their tail between their legs and never talk to you again in a situation like that more often than not. If you come back to those people and you're like, hey, we're fucking up. Like, we're making a mistake.
Well,
they're not going to be happy, but they're going to have empathy.
Yeah.
And if you're going to show up and take the kick to the teeth every time, that's one thing that this industry does like doing. We love kicking teeth in. So if you can take the kicks, even better.
Tough environment right now, not just in Michigan, but nationally. Michigan last month spiked almost 16%
Right.
growth. In fact, more than 16% growth in the adult use market alone. Although the medical market continues to fall, we're under $10 million a month now, and the medical market shrinks lower and lower every day.
More and more discussion of combining licenses in the legislature this session. So
I talked to a lot of clients in Traverse City area, and a lot of them are having a really hard time teaching their patients about adult use products.
Yeah, Traverse City is for a long time was a medical use only, just like Detroit for a very long time was a medical use only city. So as adult use programs become more mature in those communities, we see people not renewing their medical license, and therefore all the sales from that retail location are run as an adult use, and therefore you're still servicing the same customer base, but they're no longer registering as patients in order to use that retailer. So you are seeing a shrinkage of the industry, even though you're not seeing a shrinkage of medical use, which is in concept that it's sometimes difficult for people to grasp. You can't measure how much medical use is going on out there simply because by how much medical sales are going on in the industry. It's not a fair barometer.
Yeah, the adult use side is a lot more efficient and everything too, and then better prices generally.
There's a lot of reasons.
More selection, and we do like, unless there's like some really thin margin because of some great deal or something like that, we waive the excise tax for patients who come in. So if somebody like qualifies for like another type of a discount, such as a veteran or the other, there's a list of things like that that's like all 10% off. It's in addition to the 10% as a patient. So that you actually get the excise waived, then plus whatever you would be eligible for after that,
which is a really good deal.
Yeah.
I had a question about or something that I was thinking about with the reference to South Bend and Niles. Okay, so you have a state line there, right? Very black and white state line there. Think about, like, I grew up in Livonia. Okay, Livonia still has an opt-in. If you want to go buy weed, from a provisioning center, and you're from Livonia, you're driving to Ferndale, Hazel Park, Ypsilanti. I mean, that's the same exact drive as South Bend and Niles. I've been trying to pay attention to, like, look in the mirror a little bit, like, because we've been, we're drinking from a fire hose of all this industry information, cannabis business, all that every day. So we have a lot of bias from that. I still think about just going to straight up Livonia and just being like, where do you guys go to buy your weed? And why? Like, why would I have, if everyone is already okay with it, cool.
Some people get it delivered, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, the deliveries that knowing them, DoorDash for sure.
Well, and Livonia is primarily a big crammed-in area, which includes a lot of residential and some industrial too. So you got a ton of people that live actually in that city. Livonia, I think, is in the top 5 or top 6 in population for the entire state. So this is not a small issue here.
No.
Now, it's surrounded by other communities, Inkster's in there, and some other very cannabis-friendly communities. But I mean, Livonia's got that issue. Go ahead, Adam. I know you're trying to get in.
Well, I'm trying to get in on the race issue, and I believe that Livonia is
the whitest city in America, or at least had that distinction at one point.
It was.
Yeah.
At one point, it was the whitest city in America per capita, and it still, in my opinion, suffers from that mentality in many ways.
99.1.
Eric didn't offer it up because I don't think he was incredibly proud of it necessarily.
I'm not proud of that at all.
I mean, my old man had a store in Livonia, so I spent some time there growing up, and it is a little different. Like you said, people are going to go where they feel comfortable, and if it's a couple-hour drive to go, to that dispensary because that's where they feel comfortable. I hear about people coming from the Toledo area all the time. They drive by 30, 40 dispensaries before they get up to Hazel Park.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You got strain hunters too.
Yeah. Well, we just talked with everybody here about people from Illinois driving to their store in Niles. I mean, George mentioned that. The fact is, Illinois is not a short trip to Niles. It's a couple of hours. No. We see that also in the Upper Peninsula where they're on a border with Wisconsin. They'll talk about how sometimes they get people from Minnesota, which is, you have to cross the entirety of northern Wisconsin to get there from Minnesota and go all the way around Lake Superior in order to come to their dispo. So we're, again, the cannabis plant itself is a big enough draw. You just have to treat people right and have good pricing, and they'll overcome major hurdles to get to your door. Yeah, but that's not always true in the interior places. For example, Gaylord is oversaturated with cannabis stores. I'm sorry, Meds Cafe, I apologize. but other cities too. Ann Arbor has a huge number. Go ahead, Adam.
Who'd want to go to Gaylord for anything?
A lot of people on
Wow.
I-75
Well,
north.
it could be a future Meds
Wow.
Cafe that's being
Huge
looked at a
tourist
little bit. I will say
Shots
so.
fired.
I guess we will.
I-
Just
So-
there the other
I
day.
can't
That's-
think-
that's beautiful.
I can't think of a nastier place when it comes to cannabis, and I use that word lightly. I can't think of a
Detroit
nastier
deserves
place.
a reputation, man. So
Uh,
so does Oakland County.
Detroit doesn't deserve a dime of adult use money. They should be punished for the way they did their adult use nonsense.
Yeah. They
But
made
you're talking
business
to a
over-
guy. You're talking to a guy who doesn't shop in dispensaries.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, you
Yeah,
know,
you pay attention to the processes and stuff. You can
Well,
you can bitch if you want.
And I'll say again, what I've said before, that the Detroit ordinance being delayed so long actually punished the existing business owners in the medical marijuana industry in Detroit. But that was the intention, because the medical marijuana business industry owners are, for the most part, Chaldean, and they are not native Detroiters. And the Detroit City Council wanted to close as many of those as they possibly could. And not being able to legally close them, what you do is you give them an
Right.
absolutely shitty product
know,
to sell for a long time, and then hope that they close up shop because they're bankrupt. So
I didn't get a chance to talk to her, but sorry, go ahead, Adam.
I'm sorry, because I just was going to touch on what Rick said, because they forgot how the Chaldeans came to Detroit and saved Detroit.
I know.
So
There's a lot of
maybe they
positive there, but there's also a lot of
maybe
tension that was caused
should
by that.
back up all their marbles.
Yeah. So Naja Nava showed up. I didn't get a chance to talk to her very much. Sorry, Adam. I thought you stopped for a second. Naja Nava showed up today, and just incidentally, based on how fucked up the situation is, she is one of the first few Black license holders for adult use store in Detroit.
One of the legacy cannabis qualifiers, as
Yeah.
Detroit used to define it. I know that they have a new term in the new one, but it's pretty impressive that she's.
So I wish I could have seen her for a
Yeah.
second, but I saw her like sitting there for
No.
a little bit. But
She's awesome. Yeah, Najanava Harvey Quinn.
and does a lot of great advocacy work, helps people with expungements and reentry, and lots of really positive, helpful.
It's one of the beautiful things about the MiCIA conferences and other things of their ilk is that you get to again reconnect with people that you knew before, talk about new projects, and then make associations and network in a way that you really can't do over a Zoom or over Teams. And especially, the program is nice, and listening to all the speakers is great. You heard some great talk about Jeff Irwin and Brian Hanna today. But
Kevin Coleman,
Kevin
Representative
Coleman.
Coleman.
It's about the networking that happens before and after. And there's a reason why they keep the bar open for a half an hour after they close the center, after they close the conference down,
Yeah.
right? You want to encourage people to stay there and make those connections. So it's always worth the price of admission.
The next thing that I really thought was going to spark a really compelling discussion that kind of fizzled out there, though, was the workers' rights. Like, having people that test positive for cannabis that their job restricts it. Man, I always think of think about this intersectionality of green zone, right? And having all these PCs and all these other places that are in these industrial corridors. What else is in these industrial corridors? Production facilities for millworking, CNC, all this stuff, like assembly lines, and all those assembly line people who line up or to sign with whether it be a union or whether it be their employer to make sure that they don't smoke. I mean, you think that right now that those employers are testing them for weed gummies
When you don't want to lose your employees,
Yeah,
you don't
it's
test
there's
them.
no way.
It's becoming less and less.
That's
Like,
all fixing. Yeah.
so Senator Irwin did kind of say, "Oh no, it's like slow because there's some of these federal considerations and stuff like that." But the reality is,
No.
more companies on their own are letting the cannabis side of shit slide to
Yes.
have a better labor pool to choose from. And the U.S. Treasury, we talked about this before. I think it was a couple of years ago. The U.S. Treasury Department made the announcement that they were relaxing that particular requirement so they could get some quality people to help out with to stop the computer hacking and shit like that, and to those types of candidates.
Counter hackers are all smokers. And
Yeah.
they qualify.
That's how they
for
can
federal work.
concentrate on that shit.
You have to look at why they started testing in the first place.
True. No good reason.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
is because
cannabis logic in the drug war because it was based on an illogical premise.
Yep.
And everything since then has been just illogical, including the prohibition on cannabis in the workplace, treating cannabis as if it was worse than alcohol. Even nowadays, we hear crazy stories about cannabis and fentanyl being combined, which are all lies.
Oh my gosh.
That's ridiculous.
Urban myth. We've had experts on the show confirm they don't have any knowledge of that happening. It's not likely that it would. It doesn't make sense.
Addiction experts who have years of experience say, I've never seen it in my entire time.
They called it an urban myth.
Yeah. Even that news came out recently about like not even having as strong a ties of psychosis as they thought, which I mean, I'm sure a lot of people were really happy to hear that, especially the stoners that are in their own heads.
Some of these scientific experiments were created with biases built inside.
There are some times where people have certain conditions and many things.
And I haven't had anybody been able.
And it could be some way that you use cannabis. That's the thing, but it's not because of cannabis. But go ahead, Adam. Oh, now he shuts up.
Correct.
That worked out.
Well, so it's tough.
I mean, on that point, I will admit. On that point, I will admit that I have a son.
I just want to hear
my eldest son cannot smoke cannabis due to mental issues, and I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
What? Did you not hear?
Yeah.
No, we can hear you,
We
man.
did hear you say that your son cannot smoke cannabis for mental
again.
issues, and you've seen it firsthand. Yeah.
My eldest. Oh. Yeah, I've seen it firsthand. So I don't deny that it happens. I just don't believe that. Oh well, here's your problem right here.
The hardest part for me with it is going to be always like, hey, safety, right? Like, so like, I think if I'm going to be sitting down in an assembly line working for 10 hours straight or 9 hours straight, would I prefer to have 10, 20 milligrams of me? Yeah, 100%. What happens when there's an accident? That's the really, really hard part.
A lot of these policies are driven by insurance companies. An insurance company won't insure an employer unless they take severe action to stop people from using cannabis and alcohol in the workplace. Not because there's any evidence, any trail of emergency room visits connected to cannabis use, but just because insurance companies back up the price that way. If you don't test, you pay extra.
It does show up in cannabis companies, though, that cannabis, I mean, in insurance companies, that cannabis isn't considered this ridiculously huge liability. You know, for example, if you have any, it's just cannabis, it's less than if there were alcohol involved. You know, so that's reasonable. You know, like
that's kind of nice.
Yeah, but a lot of corporate policies are driven not by logic, not what's best for the consumer, but by the lawyers and by the insurance agents. That's the truth.
The numbers don't.
I like hearing that.
Well,
Intermittent.
It's always been the case with weed.
You like this interrupted, Adam, don't you? You're smiling.
Somehow managed to get his point across, nonetheless.
He still does. Yeah. Adam's a wonderful guy.
It's like, I just think it's so hard to like look at the green zones, look at all those production facilities, and look at their customers, and then you literally have to be like, I couldn't like imagine being an owner operator and be like, what do I do? Do I prioritize the actual ability to keep these lights on and these doors open and everything good? Or do I have to draw a line in the sand when it comes to safety? Like, there's so much open for interpretation. No one could possibly agree on that answer. So like, it just blows my mind that's.
Did you say safety?
Safe? Yeah.
So you mean that there's no definition of what that means to the industry?
There's
So
no
that's
there's no way. Like, I think if I'm gonna, I could look at it from some of my experiences. I managed a lot of truck drivers.
By the way, Stacy's listening, or was anyway.
Oh,
I think she still is. So who takes an interest in this very?
I managed a lot of truck drivers, right? Like, so yeah, like the line that we were always given was they were randomly tested.
Mm-hmm.
Our driver for DOT.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's for keeping a license, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I could not even imagine being like, oh man, well, we'll slide back on our testing of you if, because you're a good worker. So just keep smoking that reefer and like, if you get in a wreck, like it's on you anyway.
Right. So when that
Yeah.
liability's sitting there, that's the time when you can't really
Yeah.
make that easy decision.
Right.
Right.
The
Exactly.
fear of consequence really would drive people to do crazy things that are even even against their own best interests.
Yeah.
And when the federal government continues to maintain cannabis's illegality, then it forces that fear factor on companies, industries like trucking, or they've talked about checking cab drivers for intoxicants before they go. Go ahead, Adam.
Rick, it allows them to use it as an excuse.
Well, they have plenty of excuses.
Yeah, there are
No,
plenty of those.
but that's all that the federal government is an excuse why we can't do these things.
Yeah.
It's true. It's not based on anything, and everybody knows it. You can.
Well, that was the toughest part today. Was just again like, oh, by the way, in case you encounter anything that you think is dangerous or unsafe or unethical, you're going to go through 14 different channels potentially of anyone who will first at least listen to you and how long that takes, and then after the 15th channel, they're going to tell you, oh, by the way, we can't hear this. You can't.
Oh, Kevin McKinney was talking about not
Yeah,
having
again,
like an ethics board or something
that-
like that to take a real
Exactly.
situation to
That
that.
type of to me, it hasn't been about. It's just been about time. Like it's all about time. Like the amount of time that elapses so they can squeeze a freaking dollar out of you through that entire process.
That when we talk about Michigan being 49th in integrity and 50th in transparency, there really is no oversight of a lot of the cannabis, a lot of the lobbying industry in Lansing, and that's why some of these people that are being exposed now are they were just doing things as per usual. They're so used to breaking the rules and bending policy that it became commonplace. If you know nobody's watching you, your behavior becomes bad. That's what happens in human nature.
But that's because at one point they were all fucking cops.
I like 49 and 50 in ethics and transparency and corruption. And then you think about just the short terms. The term, like the re-elections, the amount of re-elections that you've seen that just doubled down on, and then 49th and 50th in corruption.
There was an organization
How?
from Minnesota that was here that was giving testimony during the civil asset forfeiture reform hearings a couple sessions ago. There was some movement there. I can't think of the name of the organization right now. I really wish I could, but they had great information and they recognized Michigan as, unfortunately, like they had their own scale and they had Michigan's corruption level as like amidst the worst. Go ahead, Adam. I wish I could think of their name right now. They're an important organization. They were really cool. The guy's name is Lee. I remember that, but I'd have to try to figure out more. Neuron might have to fire off. Yeah.
Adam?
What's going on with
Dubstep. What's going on?
There he is. What's going on with?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
the unfortunate truth is that Adam's system is interrupted.
Well, so go back to the whole Johnson thing, okay? The board, right?
The corruption
The
probe.
corruption probe. All right, if you have, that's like supposedly like the governmental regulation foundation, right? Now, I would think about that in the narrative that has been exposed over the last few weeks. Now consider how just in general, the med community is just not nearly as taken as seriously as the adult use community.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like the way you just described the war on drugs, right? And how that process, because it was a joke in the beginning, and now it became an even bigger joke and it fizzled out. I literally could say the same exact thing about med in Michigan.
Well, it follows a pattern that we've seen in other states where obviously as adult use sales rise, medical sales diminish. That's pretty predictable.
Mm-hmm.
However, Michigan's decline is gone so low because it was artificially buoyed by the city of Detroit, all of the sales for all the dispensaries being ranked as medical. And as we mentioned, Traverse City and other communities too, that adopted medical marijuana businesses only and did not extend that to adult use businesses. Go ahead, Adam. We got you back now.
You guys talked about oversight earlier, and all I want to say is these people have never had any oversight. They've all been police officers. Nobody paid attention to what they were doing. They all got away with, and I'm not going to say murder because there are no bodies, but when you have the head of the lab, when you have
Gary Parks well known to have gotten away with some stuff like that. I think there's at least
When you have
rumors going around.
former sheriffs committing crimes,
Mhm.
I mean, come on. These people don't know what oversight is. They don't have to worry about it.
Really, that's why Michigan is ranked so low nationally, because in our state, I know people from other states might be saying, "Well, you're painting a really dark picture." Statistically, it's proven out. What we're talking about is for real. We see joke stories or real stories about police on the take all the time here in Michigan as corruption is slowly exposed.
Do you know how many 420 stories police departments posted about busts they had that day?
Oh yeah.
That Wisconsin thing, that was just gross. I'm glad they took a bunch of Loom products out of circulation though, but I'm sorry for the people that didn't get to those things. I mean, they're in Wisconsin.
There was a bust of an automobile traveling from Michigan to Wisconsin. It was full of Michigan-based brand cannabis products that had been purchased here in the state. Of course, it's not legal to take it across state lines, and Wisconsin has certain rules about possession limits and things like that too. So the person got in trouble, but it was interesting to see the entire spectrum of brands that particular person had selected. And it was not you got vape cards, you got medibles. It looked like he was going to set up his own store in a dorm room somewhere.
They said 1,500 grams or something
He
like that.
probably was.
Probably with all the
I think so,
packaging
Adam.
and all the
What's
equipment. And
wrong
all
with
that.
that?
Well, wasn't that actually that much cannabis?
It looked
Actually,
like
I
it
mean,
was-
Not everybody that goes to college goes to get a degree.
Yeah,
Government stepping on an entrepreneur.
I know. What it really goes to show is that even though he knew he was doing wrong, other people might not. When you come from another state and you come to Michigan and it's so free and everything, you might think it's okay to take cannabis back to your home. Or you might, know that it might be a little bit illegal. The
Put on
consequence
your
of
lawyer.
that
I'll tell you what,
sometimes is really
do what you
tough.
want to do, but know the risk.
Yeah,
I mean,
put on your lawyer hat. Maybe just drive the speed limit.
yeah.
It's tough though. I mean, some of these states really have wicked laws about even small amounts of possession.
That bud tender that we
Well,
talked about earlier is going to get into some real trouble, like criminal
busted in
prosecution.
Indiana.
Yeah,
That's what's so surprising about Texas. Texas was run by weed Nazis for years,
Oh, but Texas is so conservative though.
but they're going to go before Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're going through this.
they have like a limited child oil thing or something like that
Yeah.
now, and they have some individual. They can't do a statewide effort, but you can do individual city petition drives or something. They have some.
Yeah.
Every state's got their own kind of twist on how or if you can do petition.
But it's happening. It's happening. There are people.
Yeah.
There are people who are not going to jail for weed in Texas. That's new.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you though, there are still a lot of states down south that are not very friendly and familiar, but I do recognize advancement, and Texas's stance is a move forward, especially for a southern state. Because we look at the Dakotas; they're very slow to come to Jesus on this. Idaho, give me a fucking
pretty
break,
conservative
Utah,
legislature, meets
things like
periodically.
that. But
Yeah.
the South is particularly difficult to get things done in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi had trials and tribulations in 2022 for their particular marijuana program.
Civil rights has always been something they've been slow with down south, so I'm not surprised by that.
Right, and of course that does include Florida because it's completely separate. They have a closed system where they have a limited number of dispensaries that go throughout the entire state. True Leave, I think, has more than 150 licenses and is actually a superpower in that particular market. In my personal opinion, it's a good example of how not to do cannabis businesses. When you put a limitation on licenses like that, you automatically give advantage to multi-state operators who have deep pockets and can actually buy up a bunch of licenses ahead of time. Plus, you stifle entrepreneurism.
I can hear the bullshit. Right
Yeah,
now from that whole thing.
instead of having an incentive for each new community to allow someone to come in and bring new jobs and new money into their market, I'm sorry, we're all tapped out. Even though you want one really bad, all of our licenses are given. You don't get one. That's a shitty way to deal with your populace.
Employment in Florida. Also, I can speak to this because
Well, that's what they say. Hey, what are you talking about? We're going to be creating so many jobs. Why is this a problem? This is really, this is really good.
you have to pay to apply to work in at a licensed facility. In Florida. It's $120.
That's the same for other industries, for
I'm not
maybe
certain.
restaurants.
Now, is that because
or
of a
something?
background check that you have required to
So
run?
this is part of like so I know this because we reimburse candidates that take jobs as a result of placing them for that fee.
Interesting.
It's 100.
You're talking about United Green.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a $120 fee, and you get registered into their system as someone who's going
As a potential
as a
candidate.
potential cannabis employee, and yeah, it's background check.
So that's a state level system then.
Correct.
Oh, they make money off you.
They make a lot of money off you.
So if you want to even be a bud tender, you want to sweep the floors, you want to do product inventory, you want to do pre-rolls, you have to pay the state $120 before you can even start looking for a job.
That's my understanding.
Wow.
And then of
It
course,
costs
there's a lot of people that will, unfortunately, this is just human error, but there's also a lot of limitations. Like you can't have so many misdemeanors or a felony after so many years too. So think about going through that process, paying $120, and then having something that you thought was cleared up, flagging it within the government, and then you're now flagged as you can't work for them. You're out $120. What do? Call around DeSantis personally?
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do?
The wonderful thing about the United
dude's
States of
fucked up.
America, there are 50
Different
different
story.
crucibles of democracy, 50
Yeah.
different ways to do things, right? And when you look at all different 50 ways, sometimes you cobble together a couple success
Cherry
stories
pick the
and make
good
a
shit.
make a really good program. And we hope
They
that
usually do it
finally they'll
reverse.
do
They
that.
cherry pick the shitty
I haven't
stuff.
heard anything about Florida's program that makes me think that any of that would be something. I'd
Started
wanna
off
have
where
on
you
a
couldn't
federal
even
level.
fucking smoke. You couldn't even
Oh, right.
smoke in the beginning. That's how
Pennsylvania's like-
fucking.
Well,
This thing about Illinois where they base the cost off of THC
the
percentage.
tax,
That
the
is so
base the
fucking
sales tax
stupid, man.
on cannabis
Jesus
based on
Christ.
THC percentages.
again, that's
I
because
guess maybe you can pay low tax and still get some really good cannabis.
I think
that
Blagojevich's guy wrote that personally.
That's horrible.
again,
well,
that's
it's based on might have some decent intentions, but it was based on ignorance.
but that's because you have people who don't smoke weed making the rules.
Exactly.
Yep. And people that look at the industry not as personal freedoms, but as a way to generate revenue for the state. I understand this is reasonable regulation, but when you start looking at us as an ATM, we're just citizens. And by the way, there's inflation going on right now. It's harder for people to make a living, and you want to extend the tax to 32% because it's 25% state, and then there's a local tax on top of it. People ain't doing that shit.
And that's why talk of a federal tax is never going to happen, because you can't raise California taxes by 5%.
Well, the tax that they wanted to put on top of cannabis on a federal level, it was proposed in the last session of Congress, would have really been prohibitive. And when you talk about trying to recruit people from the unregulated market, which exists everywhere and is in every city, and recruit them into the regulated market, it has to be about quality, price, and accessibility. And frankly, if you're not going to be competitive on price because your tax is too high, you are really going to struggle gaining.
But
Colorado demonstrated
Quality-
early on; they had 35%
It was
for
terrible.
taxes, and
It was terrible.
they had to go back and address it because it ended up costing way too much, and they couldn't be
What-
competitive with the.
And they have a fraction of the population that I think they have.
Yeah, and of course, here in Michigan, we have a 10% tax because we didn't do a legislative action in order to create the adult use market. We did a voter-directed initiative, which means Jamie and his maybe dozen cohorts, as well as myself and a whole bunch of other people that had some influence on it, wrote the law. We kept taxes
Robin
low.
Schneider was in the room. She
Robin
mentioned it
Schneider,
today.
for sure. Jeff Hank,
know,
Matt
they-
Abel.
oh, yeah,
I mean,
sorry.
but the fact is, we wrote it to keep 10% tax. And one of the reasons we did that is to be compassionate to the human beings, because that's what we all cannabis users are. But other states haven't had that sense of compassion. They look at us as cash registers.
Yeah, the biggest problem in Florida I see right now, outside of the obvious, barrier to entry, is the amount of the vape shops that are selling these synthetic gummies.
Yeah.
And they are poison.
Delta 8
Actual
vape
poison.
cards and
It's
things like
so it's
that.
not the fact that it's Delta 8 per se, but it's just like there's no
It's
regulation. So there's just any
poison.
fucking thing in it that's
Yes.
that they. You know,
Correct. I had to call.
Yes.
I lived in Florida for 5 years, and after doing 2 weeks of an hour a day looking into that whole situation, I literally made the call to everyone I know personally and said, "Do not buy. Go get your med card. Do not buy gummies from these vape shops."
somebody coming in from out of state comes into Florida. Any chance of getting the med card, or you have to be a resident?
I'm not
Right.
sure. I think if you do come from out of state, you can still get your med card, because I got some people that moved down there that have the med card in Florida. So
Let's let Adam get it.
Yeah, sorry, sir.
Go ahead, Adam.
Oh, I was just going to say that these places that are selling this poison, we need to work hard to make sure that doesn't reflect on us, because they are going to hurt somebody someday, and it's going to take that for the state to go after them and shut them down.
And then we get more restrictions and unnecessary prohibitions.
But we need to make sure that that's not us.
We will remember in our recent history, there was a substance that was being referred to as synthetic marijuana, which was actually, the
K2 or whatever.
K2 spice, bath salts, whatever you want to call them. But they were used, that term was used by the media, and we took a long time to convince people that it had absolutely nothing to do with marijuana at all, and it was a misnomer. We're still struggling with that.
And my response, and when I used to talk to people about that, I would have said to you, Rick, how many times did you write the newspaper and tell them they had it wrong?
Yeah.
I mean, because they did.
I've done that over the years myself too.
Acetate.
Here's the thing: when they're quoting a law enforcement person who's saying synthetic marijuana, they're going to use synthetic marijuana throughout the entire article. And there's nothing that any activists
Give it a
who
negative
don't have
sign.
medical degrees and aren't law enforcement, nothing we say can stop that. But when we see in an op-ed, or we see something where they're not actually quoting a source, they're choosing that particular term, we can complain about that all we want, because there are other ways to refer to those particular drugs that don't connect to cannabis, don't make a false connection to cannabis.
Yes, if you are in Florida, you are in Minnesota, and even here, all right? And if there, you know, more of other states that are you're seeing this trend. I've seen this trend at a lot of the vape shops, a lot of the smoke shops, those types of the synthetics in the gummies.
Mhm.
Just please, before you purchase it, look at it, look it up. I could be completely wrong. There could be a company out there that's making the most.
Oh, I'm sure there are some good ones, but yeah,
Q Culture Company who produces Delta products. I have every confidence in those, because I know Anquinette personally. I know Anquinette and Richard, and I know that they put their stuff through rigorous testing.
Yeah.
But you can imagine that in Oklahoma, where there's this huge excess of biomass, somebody might cook up a shit ton of gummies, throw them in a semi truck, no matter what the temperature is, drive them to Michigan, and then go from vape shop to vape shop saying $5 a case, $5 a case. You can make 150. You can make 150.
Yeah.
And that's how those things get into these little shops.
Yeah.
And it's an off-sale transaction that doesn't have a receipt to it, doesn't have anything associated with it, so it's impossible to track.
And Oklahoma was just an example that they don't necessarily always come from
I'm just
Oklahoma, and you don't know of a situation in which.
But we do know that there's an excess of biomass in a lot of different states. It could be coming from.
Well, the
other side of
distillate
the
thing that
Rockies.
we experienced for a while was like,
Oregon,
you know,
South Carolina.
Yeah, Oregon too. Oregon is another state, by the way, with a huge problem. In Michigan, it's a very, very hot topic to talk about a moratorium on cannabis licenses, a moratorium on cannabis cultivation licenses as a method of checking the out of control supply situation with cannabis flower and products here in Michigan. I think that it's becoming less and less urgent in the community now the distillate prices have rebounded. Jamie, what do you think about that?
you have to rephrase that for me, please.
So the urge to issue a moratorium on cannabis cultivation licenses may have been eased by the rise in distillate prices.
Yeah.
If people have an optimism about the market, they're less likely to take a drastic move like enacting a moratorium if they feel like there's signs that it's increased. And in the last 2 months, the price of cannabis flower has increased both months, even though it's been a slight increase, less than $10 total. However, it arrests several year-long trend of declining prices.
And the moratorium is still being discussed in the legislature potentially, but I think a lot of people also think, myself included, that if there was a time when it might have had some value, it's probably past.
Yeah.
Or why would you do this one objective criteria for the entire state in that capacity, but not do it for the opt-ins?
Mm-hmm.
Go to each of the towns that opted in and ask them individually if they want a moratorium. That would be the precedent that's already been set. Why would you just? That doesn't make
a lot
any
of pressure
sense.
From a lot of the businesses, even much of the MiCIA membership. seeing how it kind of worked in Oregon, or
Yeah.
so it was perceived, and thinking, hey, we should do that now because they're really struggling.
Well,
But
we have a unique,
it's not as-
thing right here because of all these properties, like over the pandemic here, all these properties, commercial businesses that are empty. Like, you want to talk about a perfect opportunity to help build Michigan for the future? Let's take that same moratorium principle and reverse it. Allow the opt-ins to the entire state, and then you're going to talk about all these empty warehouses in all these towns that aren't opted in that are now green zoned, and you have jobs, and you have a much better, less clotted market, a lot better supply.
I don't think there's any zeal on the part of anybody to have the state overrule local control over whether or not they take cannabis businesses. I understand the reasoning behind it, but I don't think there's a whole lot of people that are backing that up in the legislature. Go ahead, Adam.
And the city of Detroit already proved that that's bull. I mean, they had 285 illegal unlicensed dispensaries in 285 vacant shops. It's the greatest anti-blight program Detroit has ever seen.
And they cleaned up properties around them because they didn't want to be seen being in a shithole of places where people would not want to drive to.
Listen, next to every strip club in Detroit was an empty building owned by the same guy. And he put a dispensary in there, and he cleaned up the neighborhood. And the city said, we don't care. We're going to come in and we're going to write a law. And oh, by the way, we're going to put this bomb in the law so that our friends can get in line before the rest of you.
The bomb in the law. Yeah. Jamie's phone just vibrated when you said bomb in the law. It was actually quite.
It was pissed because it's
almost poetic.
It's also its own little passionate activism.
Yeah, there was a time when all these unlicensed centers were in existence in Detroit, and Detroit passed an ordinance which allowed caregiver centers, as they described them, which was just basically a
what we started years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, in concept.
It was, but the fact is, it gave them a shield to not shut down any of these 295. We're allowed to keep them open,
Right, yeah.
And there were an awful lot of contributors from those 295 individual businesses to Detroit City Council persons' pet projects. If you wanted to curry favor, one of the ways to do it is to donate to the the Aretha Franklin Statue Fund, which happens to be the pet project of council person XYZ. Gabe Leland is in jail right now for taking influence and bribes as a council member from, what was it, Adam? Is that the traffic, the towing industry? Is that what got him?
Yeah, he was part of the towing game. Yeah. There were two city council members indicted in the last 10 years there. Yeah. All for taking bribes. I mean, it's politics.
Stacy's bringing up that in cities where some of the companies that came in were bigger and had lots of employees, and then ended up having to shut down and lay them off in those areas that doesn't look very attractive to a lot of the people that were arguing to let them in, and we're going to create jobs. And
for sure.
Did you hear about the company in Michigan that said they were willing to hire the 400 Burger King employees?
I did not.
Were just laid off?
So a Burger King franchisee is losing his franchises, 29 stores shutting down in Metro Detroit, potentially 400 employees losing their jobs. And the cannabis company Stizzy, STIIZY in Michigan, said, every single one of you motherfuckers, come work for us. We got a spot for you in our cultivation facility in Macomb County, and
production facility
for you in other places as well, because all the stores were in Metro Detroit, which is very adjacent to Macomb County. So it would work out well for those ex-employees. It's a pretty bold statement to make, but it's also a good way to bring in people into the market.
I dig it. Actually, I think
Three eyes.
Yeah.
Is it three eyes? It's three eyes. Oh no!
It's okay. I'll forgive you in time.
The eye in the middle is the one I forgot.
The third eye. They
The
are. Look, I when I first was introduced to their brand, I was a little skeptical. I'm not gonna lie, but now that I've had a chance to work closely with a lot of their stakeholders, complete 180 for me. They are. I love it. I think that is so smart. Again, intersectional. Think about someone that's been at Burger
I have a
King.
scotch more respect for him now. I'm not saying I was excited about him before, but I think that's a really cool thing.
It's kind of cool. I'm not a big fan of disposable vape products. I think it's bad for the environment, and I think that anything that inherently has a battery in it has to be reusable or at least rechargeable. It makes no sense to me for us to be continuing to pollute our landfills with some of the stuff that are these forever chemicals. and add metals into our waterways, which we know harms our children. But I will say that I love what they're doing, the Stizzy, and I know they have different products too. They're not just disposables. So that was my comment on disposables in general,
We don't
not
have to-
Stizzy in specific.
As we say all many times, somebody doing something good doesn't absolve them of the things that we don't necessarily like.
For
But
sure.
Yeah.
Gradual.
Sounds like you've been to church.
Hallelujah.
I went to church 2 times a year for 14 years straight, brother.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Easter and Christmas.
Or 2 times a week. My bad. 2 times a year for the last 14 years.
2
Yeah.
times a year. That's a couple weddings.
Priest
That's
or-
what I get
no.
usually. Yeah.
2 times a week. My mistake.
Yeah. The reality here in Michigan is that we have a lot of
can't
people
even
that
fucking
care.
remember.
You saw George here earlier from Greenstown, and let me tell you, that's a guy that cares. Our industry is created with a lot of folks that care, and Adam will tell you that it's our industry, but it was his culture. And the fact is, that's where caring came from. Remember when cannabis was the connector, the social nexus, the way that people connected and related to each other. And it's from that spirit of brotherhood that the industry that we now are talking about throughout this entire motherfucking show, that's the nexus of love that created the whole thing. Now, there are some people playing the game now that don't really
Fellowship,
get the whole love
as
kind of
John-
thing.
Well-
But it was born out of, especially because we went medical first and then legal. So it started off on a compassionate basis and have led from there. But it's really that establishment of peace, love, and understanding that came along with the cannabis plant that's, I think, influenced the industry even to today.
So I just want to say that about our conversation about getting excited about Stizzy's move. Stacy brings up that there are $16 an hour on average jobs.
Yeah.
And then Red Setter Farm, Bros Grow Show, great show, by the way, if
Yeah.
people haven't checked it out. And he's got some other shows too, Polarity Science and stuff. But $16 an hour for factory job under factory conditions and risk, chemicals and radiation.
Yeah,
You do better
but-
for factory work.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not factory work where they can get stoned.
But you
Or
can't get
where
stoned
there's-
on parcel. You got to step
there's
off
no
parcel.
union representation. So
You probably can't even test positive for most
So
of that factory work.
The criticism too is like, even though it's potentially more than you make in fast food or could get
Yeah.
paid more or something like that, that doesn't mean it still commensurates with the conditions that they're,
Right.
I think it's a bold
Stepping
move
into.
to take care of training.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, think about like again, customer service training. Like those people know a script. Like they know how to answer to like that. It stinks. It's very military like, right? Institutional like, but they're trained. A lot of these folks that I've seen. That I'm not speaking in wide sweeping objections, but like, you think about like this law right now going from 21 to 18 to allow people
21 to 19.
I'm sorry, 21 and 19. 21 and 19, like, all right, just from the science aspect of it, right? Like, we encourage people to continue using it, right? But like now you're talking about people that are working in these facilities at age 19 to 21. We don't even know. We don't have enough data of what it's like to be 21 and up and working here.
Well, in Michigan, they just passed a law last year which allows 19-year-olds to serve alcohol now. It used to be that you had to be 21 years of age to drink it and 21 years of age to serve it. Now you can be 19. So people in the cannabis industry are like, well, if bars can do this and alcohol is way worse than cannabis, why can't we? And I follow the logic there, but I understand that to some people it might look premature.
I think that the stores will hire and circumstantially individually, and there could be a 19 or 20-year-old, perhaps a patient, perhaps going to school in a cannabis program. Maybe that's an internship or something like that, and to have those ages to be able to be more flexible with working with the schools and some other things. And just some people that, are that age. Like I can imagine, Amy's son Jaden when he's like 18, 19 years old.
Amy
Man.
Carter.
I'm sorry, Amy Carter's son Jason. Yeah, either the base of Jaden's law, which would be able to use cannabis on school grounds as other medicines.
As an autism patient.
Yeah, and I could see him like having a really good message and ability and awareness and the things that you would want in somebody, to be in that position in a store. And if he was interested, it would be cool to have him around. So circumstantially, probably not like, the concept of like all these influx of younger people you get to pay cheaper. There's probably some people thinking, like that. I'm sure, but it doesn't have to be like that.
No.
It could be utilized in a very positive way potentially. So
We talked a lot about the corruption probe with Rick Johnson, and we also talked about some potential new legislation that's coming down the pipe too, including a legislation that would allow tribal entities to be able to work within the state framework, even though they're on federal property, in order to participate in our Michigan state regulated cannabis program. Right now, because of the autonomy that each individual indigenous group has, they're able to launch cannabis retail and production facilities without any oversight from the state and without paying any taxes. Good for them. Certainly, certain tribes have made a better use of that ability than others, but you are limited in your supply base because you can't interact with this 1.2 million cannabis plants that are currently being grown in the state of Michigan. So the tribes are seeking access to that particular supply chain, and in exchange, giving up some sort of oversight and control by the state. It seems like a win-win there, but that legislation has been fraught with some issues, Jamie.
Yeah.
The third.
That was my profound response.
Well,
The third thing I think too is just think about the land itself, all right, and where it is, and think about how it's being used currently. Okay, so like obviously the first thing that stereotypically will come to mind will be casino land. You want to talk about being able to build an infrastructure around these casinos. I mean, who is the predominant patron of a casino? It is predominantly elderly people. So now you have elderly people who are walking past cannabis businesses.
Fastest growing demographic of
Yeah.
cannabis users.
and into
The late Robert Platshorn, did a concentration on that. He did the Silver Tour after he got out of prison, and he modeled it after like an infomercial that was very popular at the time to that demographic and got information to them. It was
a senior tour on buses that went around and
Yeah.
talked about cannabis, the Silver Tour.
if
Silver
you
Tour.
look at these casinos, a lot of them that are Native American or indigenous people owned and operated, there's a lot of vacant land around right now.
I remember we had Courtney. She's now the leads the tribe, the Bay County tribe, or is that right? From
Bay Mills.
Bay Mills, that's right. And
So this is why I'm worried. I'm just saying that I'm worried that there is like another macro play here to try and increase industry and get your dollar off of that land.
Yeah,
and
well, I think there is.
Ring out those casinos for more THC consumption. And I see, great. Look, that's more allies, right?
what we hope, so now they can tap into, like, it could happen anyway, but it's not as like widespread. But with this opportunity of being part of the metric system, buy from, sell to, for these tribal businesses, but still being able to retain, some of their models. They can start demonstrating more efficient systems that should be pretty competitive, and hopefully a bunch of people do go there, and we may then become more broad and liberal in our statewide approach then as a result sooner. That could be a good result of that.
Are they allowed? Are the tribes currently allowed at the federal level to trade interstate?
No.
I don't know that we've ever seen an example of that successfully done, although tribes have made the argument that they can, but it doesn't seem like there's contiguous tribal areas.
You can bring it in and then get it into the system that way. So we'd be then starting to open up interstate trade.
There is out.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
There are
You got to drive through places that
Once you leave
aren't
reservation
happy about it.
property,
Yeah.
I do believe there are reservations out west that cross state line,
Oh, you know what that could be?
but
There's huge spaces, and they're sometimes butted up against each other, contiguous we call it, and that means that you could pass from one to the other without
But
leaving federal property.
I don't think they're moving any weed from reservation to reservation.
Not that they want us to know.
At least not legally.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Maybe unless the shamans are traveling with it, and they
Well, the
have
key-
been constitutionally protected in the past anyway.
Key to success here in Michigan cannabis business seems to be vertically integrated. That means that you have a retail store, but you also have production too. So you're growing cannabis and then you're selling it in your own stores. Plus, you're augmenting what you're selling with some small purchases made from other suppliers. But the cannabis industry on the tribal lands is also vertically integrated because otherwise they have very little supply. Now, we know for a fact that at this particular time in Michigan, many of the Native American tribes persons are purchasing, at least we believe this, from the caregiver market, from the excess overages that are being produced by Michigan's caregivers. Remember that the entire regulated cannabis market ran on caregiver overages for a period of time while we waited for cultivation centers to get up and operating. So as a source of cannabis, it's already proven to be valuable in the retail location and being produced in quantity and readily available. So the tribal entities are already sourcing through the Michigan program, or at least outside of the res. So at this time, the Cannabis Regulatory Agency is just trying to gain control over that supply and demand.
And Senator Irwin said today it was probably an oversight, as there were a few others in the original language and approach. And so he's viewing it as a fix later on. And I read through the language there. He did mention that funding stuff. And so, that was addressed maybe all the way, possibly to a degree. We kind of have to look into that a little bit. But
Yeah. What do you think about, you bring up a great point with the markets. What do you think about a new government body, a new industry, and government taking an interest in market trends specifically?
I don't understand that.
so you saw the guy from the
On a
government give the presentation on the market trends and stuff like
Yeah,
that. And you're
I'm
wondering,
saying,
is that appropriate, or do you think
I'm
that's
saying exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, with everything that we know, objectively wrong with the CRA. Okay,
I think it has to do with the emerging industry and them trying to create efficient systems and,
Sure.
and bureaucratically develop something. And they also want to be a model for national considerations when things go. So, I think in that way, they go ahead, Adam. They think the information is important.
I still think we're one generation of die-off before the people making the rules, writing the game, playing the game, making the laws, understand it. Forget about whether they use it or not. I mean,
Be a part of their life long enough to not
yeah,
be
I-
sensationalized by it anymore. And
Some people in
stuff,
power
yeah.
are grudgingly doing things that are pro-cannabis, not necessarily because they feel it within, but just because they're sort of obligated to do it.
they know it's the right thing to do.
Yep, when we switch to people who actually feel it on the inside and are actually interested in big,
and-
robust programs that really help people, then we'll see a change in law.
And Reefer Madness didn't include darkies for them.
I want to clarify too, just like it. I guess that the celebrating victories is one thing. Like celebrating victories, identifying that we are kind of climbing out of a hole from a market, and that you're on the ground, like you understand personally what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
As do a lot of people we interact with. I get really concerned about government lever pulling, where it's just like, where they're paying attention to the market. Okay, what can we do to influence this? And what levers can we pull to either maintain this?
Which is what they did when they issued the excess producer license to try and kickstart the cultivation industry, and what they could potentially do if they enforce a moratorium on cultivation licenses.
And I can tell you how you get this done. It's real simple. You take a whole bunch of money, you hire a lobbyist, and you let them spread it around.
You hire a lobbyist who was just formerly the House Speaker, ideally,
Right.
or majority.
40,000
Same
employees for
game
150,000.
we've been bitching about is the game that's going to, win the series for us.
The one thing Rick Johnson did is it stopped us from talking about Green Peak executive. What's his name?
Radway, Jeff Radway.
Jeff Radway, of course, ousted as Skymint CEO as this company undergoes receivership in one lawsuit against him. It's accused that he had several extramarital affairs with people who were directly reporting to him, women
His
who were
sister-in-law.
directly reporting. And, that's Wentworth.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's Chatfield.
Yep.
You're
So
using
Chat-
there's so many crazy stories going on. It's hard to keep.
Wait,
one guy
how did
straight.
they do their?
I've been tracking
Particular bad
all the
behavior and
government
crime,
extramarital affairs.
Yeah,
They'll
but we
check the
shouldn't-
box.
But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Radway. And again, I don't want to celebrate another man's demise. However, Radway made
Bad
himself
player.
he made himself an enemy of the people right off the bat by attacking patients and caregivers in the system and saying that our cannabis was dirty and unfit to be smoked.
Became part of the
people.
MCMA, tried to
He
peel back rights.
Absolutely did.
Fuck
It's
'em all.
entirely possible that Skymint is either Company B or Company C that is yet to be named in a lawsuit against or in charges that have been filed against two lobbyists.
There is stories within that company too about certain improper behaviors with, perhaps
mismanagement
things,
of funds. Gosh, some of the stories we have here in Michigan, you wouldn't believe.
maybe some certain assaults, possibly.
You wouldn't believe unless we were 49th and 50th in corruption and ethics.
I would say let's talk about those stories. Let's publish those stories. Out these people, and let's show them how good the black market really was for marijuana.
Amen.
Because we didn't used to play those games.
You know, the problem is like because these other players come in though, as Eric's kind of alluding to, and what exists in some places, it's like within our culture and people we know, and generally somebody who knows somebody, we were typically, even if it was kind of fucked up, we were typically okay with just getting, our cannabis, our bag, or whatever was fucking available, But now there's, you got to have some filter, some idea that it's not a fucked up product.
The black market never cared about the mom and pop weed shop. Okay?
Yeah.
It's the big guys that came in that the black market got down on.
The black market never employed a lobbyist, never paid off a lawmaker.
And that the big money interest came down on, vice versa, right?
So a completely different set of needs for the black market to be successful versus the regulated
Right,
market.
which is
The
part
black
of the,
market is successful.
part of the
Is
problem.
The black market,
Well,
It
it highlights or it exposes that
Yeah.
lack of perspective by the big money interests, believing that they come in and they displace this all of
Yeah.
a sudden, or
The-
that
the
that
black
was
market,
just stupid,
the black market became more successful the longer it existed, even with war declared against it for 40 years. So maybe they should have gone to the black market. And
It doesn't
said,
matter what
"How
the
do we
laws
do
are; it's
this?"
that activity is around,
Well,
right?
I know.
Adam, they are. So this is the biggest crux of being in this industry and actually caring beyond the money. All right, and it is you are split in half, okay? Because you want to do right by your business and you want to make the concerted effort to grow and scale and progress, but you also can understand and respect of the black market, and you don't really trust law enforcement, and you don't really, government intervention has a history, a penchant for being terrible. So, like, you're literally two people at the same exact time, and if you're trying to do the right thing in this industry.
Yeah. What we've seen too is that there seem to be, excuse me, that there are ways in which the cannabis industry duplicates other industries. We talked about this earlier, and there are ways in which it's unique. One of the ways in which it's unique is this black market we've been talking about, the illegal, unregulated marketplace, whatever you choose to call it. As a cannabis consumer, I can go to a regulated market store, or I can go to an unregulated source and get my cannabis. I have many choices.
Yeah.
And that's available to everybody in almost every city. So when it comes down to it, conversion of people from the unregulated market to the regulated market has, like we talked about, everything to do with price, but it's also how you treat people.
Yeah.
My unregulated market sources are guys I'd go to the football game with, right? I mean, that's why it's generational. You can never wipe out the unregulated marketplace. This is generational.
Due to me running my mouth, I don't have the same options as the rest of you guys. So I can't go into a dispensary, at least through the front door.
But you're right, Rick. It's crazy that, like, think about like down south. I'll use the South as an example. Publix. Like, what kind of industry are we where you're like, if you're like Publix, you sell produce, you sell groceries, you sell whatever. Are the middle management and owners of Publix going to, like, the street corner watermelon stand being like, we like you guys, thanks for selling those watermelons on the street?
Nope.
But that's what we do. And that's insane. It's amazing though. It's amazing, but it's insane.
This is an emerging industry.
Our industry is created on compassion. It wasn't created on competitiveness. It was born from the community that Adam talks about. This brotherhood, this connection. So our soul, the soul of the cannabis industry, is being corrupted, but it didn't start corrupted. A lot of other industries, fast food, things like that.
So in hindsight, in real life, MFLA, as shitty as it is, in our story, was kind of a necessary component
Medical marijuana facilities.
to take a next step.
Yeah.
That said, we had developed or a system came into being, with the concept of what Rick and I did early on and other people of having a central location where caregivers can bring what they don't need and, for their immediate
500 across
patients
the state at one
and-
point. Adam mentioned there were
we can make connections. We
280
can all
in the
that
city of Detroit alone.
and it worked, so just like, let's codify this, couple of regulations on the side, and let's go. Cause it's demonstrated. It had a few years.
But
by then.
it came from us, and it can't come from us because we're the bad people.
It can't make too much sense. Not everybody you can't split the money. Only a few people can make it. And that was ironically the motivation of the MMFLA, which helped move things forward, but had a totally different intention by those who were kind of driving it.
And we've seen this repeatedly, not just at the state level. We've seen it at the local level. Detroit is a fine example.
A fine example of what? Please explain. I'm going to regret that.
Fucking around before policy comes in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not
So-
what I was going to say.
Yeah. So Shelley, I just want to go back to that. I put that up for a second and I was going to mention it. Shelley's talking about the good old emergency 19 days. When,
See, I wasn't a fan of that either.
I was a fan of keeping it going.
I
Under
think
certain
that's
conditions.
That system should have failed, and they should have had to rewrite it.
Well, it was done because it was a stupid fucking shitty system, and then the people implementing it didn't really have any experience, or
No
anything to
clue
base anything on,
whatsoever.
so-
It
We
should have
told the state-
completely failed. And caregivers should have gone out into the street and said, we're here for you. Forget the government. You don't need the government. We'll help you.
In the MMFLA, we said specifically, start cultivation centers first. In our testimony to the committees, both in the House and the Senate, start cultivation first, get it off the ground, and then open retail stores afterwards. If you open both of them, you'll have no product whatsoever. It'll be a complete disaster, and you'll alienate a lot of the people that want to use your system, and they did not.
And just point out, in reality, there was a cultivator that was first and stood alone for a little while.
Well,
I think it was called something Chesaning.
thing.
Yeah, it might be connected to the Chilani scenario. I think it was a connection there.
But you have to know numbers. This
And how they
13th
position
state,
themselves like that, and the shit that we're hearing now. I don't know. Just
But-
thought
but-
about it. Hopefully, just by pure coincidence, and nobody did anything.
what's important to know about that whole concept in Michigan is that we taught other states that you can't do one without the other, and you better do them in the right order. And when some of these East Coast states decided that it was time to go legal, they opened up, they started with their grows before they would allow their dispos.
You know
We
what?
found the sword.
What I see in other states also too is in Michigan, we get medical at 2008 and then we have adult use at 2018. There's a 10-year period there where there was growth, there was an industry acceptance by the populace and everything too. I see states out east where they go medical in 1 year and then 2 years later want to go adult use. You haven't really developed your medical program yet. And at that point, you haven't helped to educate your public. You haven't you haven't had any come to Jesus opportunities with your populace. And you probably, after 2 years, just got medical businesses off the ground.
You're going to undermine the entire mission.
But everybody wants to rush forward because they see the dollar sign. Adult
But-
use is far more popular than medical.
An example I would give you is California took 20 years, and
Yeah.
their system's no better, if not worse.
They started in the mid '90s with Berkeley, right?
There were people that voted for adult use cannabis in California who had never been alive a day when medical cannabis wasn't legal.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
We're seeing people in Michigan as most of their adult lives have
I mean, we all
included some,
The dispos just down at the corner is
Yeah.
how they grew
right.
up.
We've all heard Josie kind of laugh.
or yeah, they're
about
young
how
guys.
I've been doing this since I was a teenager. Ha,
14.
ha, ha.
She got her was the first pediatric
Pediatric.
patient at 14. Yeah.
Right.
We found that out at Eric's place, and
Oh, yeah.
the question came up, and we got the answer. It was 14. So she is now just going to turn 30 before too long. I think she's like 28 or 29 right
It's
now.
half a generation, right?
So,
Yeah.
and a kid growing up. Yeah.
So the reality is that we're looking at a long-term history here in Michigan of cannabis use. And again, we talk about educating the public. It's kind of a mixed bag here in Michigan because, yes, we have a populace that's far more accepting of cannabis than other states are. However, the number of municipalities that have come on board to offer opportunities for cannabis businesses in their communities,
Very
very small. We have over 1,700 municipalities in Michigan, and less than 200 have decided to say yes to cannabis businesses. So there's public acceptance, but yet there's still the system resisting change.
Anybody's still here?
You know how to do that.
Saddle up with this handsome guy.
There you go.
Thanks.
Would you chase him away or what happened?
You know, he was just checking to see if there was any other living
Go to-
being here.
Gonna look for more pot is what he's doing. Cannabis, that's Jamie. Now, Adam, how are things with you? You doing okay? I mean, I know we've.
Oh, I'm fine. To be honest, I bump my head and I take some medication that requires me to go get CAT scan if I bump my head. Causes bleeding easily. It's a blood thinner. So I'm completely fine.
I'm good too.
You're
know,
completely fine. I've known you for a long time, and I've never used that term to describe you.
I chazzed my banger, so I'm a little pissed off. It's taken a while to clean, but
Okay.
We're wrapping up. I came up to be part of the show, so if I come down here, yeah, there's Missy. Missy didn't know she would have been hanging with us. Nobody gave her the word, which is another few.
Your audio's choppy, Jamie,
Brian.
by the way.
I'm sorry. God damn it. Sorry, Kyle, I thought I was like slick that I remembered your name.
hey, look who's there.
Sorry, but I do. There's the mighty mullet. Hey,
Michigan.
Alex has shown before. I'm sure the crowders.
Adam, get some Bassett racing on that forehead, all right?
Right.
Botanical.
Oh, I
Botanical
did
Company
myself
Field.
in pretty good.
I see
And
that.
then what's
I saw it on online.
Yeah,
I agree.
that picture was unattractive.
I only posted.
We're about to wrap up here in a second.
No, it's all good. But Adam, I'm glad you get
Thirsty for Orion?
You guys, you
No,
run.
I just made a simple mistake. Sometimes a cigar is a cigar. Well, thank you very much.
What'd you say?
All right, I'll be right back then.
I'm listening to Jamie.
Oh.
She asked me if I was thirsty for another Ryan because I accidentally called Al Ryan. And I said, no, I'm not for another Ryan. I said, sometimes a cigar is a cigar.
It's funny.
Which is a Freudian.
He muted himself.
Yes. Hey, sir, thank you.
We are 4 minutes away from the end of the program here. I just got to say, what a wonderful show it's been. We had the Green Stem
Well,
folks
I
here
gotta turn it off
too.
there. It's over there. It's over there. Hold on.
Yeah. You're doing great. There you go. See?
So these are the new products that Missy gave me to check out, and portions of these sales will go to Glenn.
Sweet Justice, which is the, as we learned today, the state's first cola-infused beverage, or infused cola beverage, I suppose is a better way for me to put that. So
It's all true.
it is all true because I said it.
All right. So Eric, that echo's gonna suck probably. Final thoughts.
No, you said mute.
One thing I'll say is that, I've been to the last 6 MiCIA events, and I'm seeing a very gradual but palpable progression in just the quality of conversations, addressing the issues, and ultimately this dialogue between the CRA and the MiCIA, I think, is way stronger in a short period of time than it was before. And that's just, credit to a different style, not necessarily a dig at the previous regime. It's just, I really want to actively encourage everybody right now to just, again, take a peek at the product labels of whatever you're purchasing from provisioning centers. Hold these companies accountable, hold these retail centers accountable to come forward with their end of the bargain when you're giving them your hard-earned money.
Well, you don't drop the mic right now.
Drop the mic now.
Well, he was trying to squeeze out early, and I said,
Well, you got to stay until the end of the fucking show at this point. Just like,
for 4 minutes. No.
hey, Adam's trying to say something, and if you unmute, you may have your final words, but you do have to unmute first for us to hear you.
I do think that the MCMA helped to buffer and raise the MiCIA because they came in and claimed that they represented the industry, and another group showed up and said, we're a much bigger footprint in that industry. These people have lied to you. So, I think that their relationship was actually bolstered by what we just went through. And I believe they're actually going to be listened to a little more, and people might actually start paying some attention to them as an organization where maybe
The MCMA is Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association, which is a failed trade group whose name has been mentioned, or at least some of their principles have been mentioned in connection with this corruption scandal we talked about earlier. And they only ever represented no more than 12 customers as far as we know. And they considered them to be the Apples and the General Motors of the cannabis industry.
And Tetris Effect says, shout out Light Sky Farms. Light Sky Farms is at the event today. They were sponsors, and I believe everything goes well. Rick and I and Jake will be there.
they became the Tuckers of the industry.
Super sweet.
And yep. And again, I guess.
Yeah.
So and Shannon, we go way back with old Shannon Walters from the original Light Sky. So yeah, it was fun over there. I appreciate everybody who came on today. Eric, George, and Katie. Did anybody else slide in? Come on. Well, whoever was here, really appreciate it. It was a good day, and everybody who watched. And
Thank you, gentlemen.
yeah, and it was a good event that we had to discuss today, and some information that came out of it. And with that, I guess Rick, wrap us up, and we'll be able to join the party downstairs.
Well, again, we had a lot of recap of the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association event today. And again, the information we received there was crucial if you're in the industry or if you're one of the watchdogs. But it's about the networking. It's about the human interaction and the way people get together and shake hands and embrace as if old friends. That's the type of networking that you need in order to develop strong resources in this industry. So I encourage everybody to attend all of these events if you get a chance to. Anything that's regionally connected to you, because you never know what bond you're going to be able to make. And along the way, if you happen to see a patient that needs a joint, pull one out and fork it over because they deserve it.
Adam can relate. All right. Thank you very much. Another good one. And Jazz Cabbage Cafe. See you guys next week. See you guys.
Cool.